Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So this video today is going to be about the re-emergence of your old self and how it can be an intense experience. And I'll explain why in a minute, but I just wanted to mention that I've been struggling with some health issues lately that I've talked about in other videos, and I got some blood work done and the results came on the online health portal, and they're a little bit concerning and I don't know exactly what they mean, but I'm a little bit worried to say the least. And I have a follow-up appointment with my doctor tomorrow, who unfortunately isn't my amazing doctor that I had for a long time through this nightmare of withdrawal. This is a new person because my doctor moved away and I don't know her. I've only met her once, so I'm trying to trust that she's going to review the results properly and give me some guidance on what's going on and maybe what to do next. But I don't have a lot of faith in doctors or the system, as you probably know. So anyway, that's what's been going on. So I have backed off a little. I've just been seeing my current clients for coaching, and yeah, just kind of trying to take it easy lately. And my schedule has just been really full with what I'm already doing and the stress I'm dealing with. So I have reopened my calendar back up for the time being, but I just wanted to let you guys know that that's where I've been and what I've been up to. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about what I mean by the reemergence of your old self and how it can be an intense experience. So people tell me all the time, I miss my old self. I miss me. I miss what I used to be like, what I used to do, what I used to love. I miss my family. I miss whatever the situation is. There's usually several different things. They often talk about, I miss whatever it might be. And I made a video about this several months ago about the grieving process and how a lot of people go through the steps of grief during their withdrawal journeys, and how the two are quite parallel because essentially you are grieving who you used to be or who you thought you were or who you once were or whatever. But I want to elaborate on my own experience through this journey because I think it's relevant to a lot of you, and it might give you hope, and it probably will give you hope, and it'll explain maybe a little bit more of this sort of long process, especially if you're early on. So if you are familiar with, and I'm sure a lot of you are, Dr. Peter Breggin. So he has several YouTube videos. He's a psychiatrist, or was a psychiatrist. I don't think he still practices in the US. And I don't believe he's ever prescribed a psychiatric drug. Anyway, he talks about how harmful they are and their detrimental effects on people. And one of the things he talks about, or he coined the term, I believe he coined it, medication spellbinding. And that is essentially the best analogy is a drunk person not realizing that they're drunk. So if you've ever had too much alcohol and you just insist that you're fine and you can drive, which obviously is horrible, or you can do XYZ, and your friends are like, no, you can't, give me the keys, whatever, you aren't aware of how much the alcohol has influenced you and how drunk you actually are. And he said psychiatric drugs work the same way, where they kind of take away a lot of different facets of you, and you don't even realize it until maybe much later on, if at all. So that was my experience. So I took citalopram from 2011 to 2018 for a situational depression. I never needed them, and I loved the drug for the first several months. I felt like it took away any anxious feelings that I was having, any situational depression. I really did feel well on it. And over time, things really started to change. So before I ever took psychiatric drugs and up until the situational depression, I always was someone who was very content, very empathic. I wore my emotions on my sleeve. I was very fit and healthy. I was very social. I was very connected. I had lots of friends. I was very close to my family. I had lots of dreams and goals. And I just was genuinely a happy person. And then when I had the situational depression, that changed, but it was for good reason, and it was not very long lasting. And I fully believe I would have just recovered naturally. But of course, the doctor gave me antidepressants. And looking back in hindsight, I realized like how much the drugs changed who I am, like at my core. So they changed my physique. I went from fit and healthy to like getting a gut and just different fat distribution, and my whole body changed and looked different. I developed sexual dysfunction. I developed, our society kind of talks about, especially on social media, how psychiatric drugs and antidepressants are so wonderful because they take away your anxiety and your depression. But the thing is they're not smart. It's not like they can compartmentalize and just take away those things. They often will take away all of your emotions, your positive ones, your passions, your feeling, sort of your joy for life. They kind of just numb everything. They certainly did for me. I was unable to cry. I didn't really feel much of anything. Nothing really excited me. And so over time, while I was taking these drugs, I developed a pretty severe drinking problem that progressively got worse and worse and worse. I'd always been a little bit of a partier, but it was always like responsible and always with other people. And, I never did anything crazy like drink and drive or anything. And then once I took antidepressants for long enough, I think it was maybe because I had become so numbed out to my emotions, and because I found out later antidepressants can cause alcohol cravings. I just started drinking more and more and more frequently, and a lot of times alone, and not even for a special occasion or party, just all the time when I was just sitting at home watching TV. And I would drink morning, noon, and night. I would drink before work. I was drinking during work. I really didn't even socialize anymore without drinking. So everywhere I went, I took alcohol with me. It was becoming a serious problem, and I was in AA in 2014, so about 4 years into my antidepressant use. So it had progressed to quite a serious situation by then. I was drinking and driving, just making all kinds of horrible decisions, and really not thinking clearly, not thinking properly. I also was taking antihistamines to sleep at night. I was mixing it with weed. So I don't know, like alcohol just made me feel so good for so long until it didn't anymore. And then I really didn't have any idea how to have fun or enjoy life at all without it. And so these antidepressants were causing all of these problems. And of course, like, I don't have a parallel universe where I could say, oh, none of this would have happened if I wouldn't have taken psychiatric drugs. Maybe I would have developed an alcohol problem anyway, or maybe my physique would have changed. But I really don't believe that it would have happened like that if I wouldn't have taken these drugs. When I did an interview with Dr. Joseph Witt-Doerring on his channel, if you want to check it out, when I was telling my story to him, he said it sounded like you were almost hypomanic. And I tend to agree, because I was doing things totally out of character for me, and just the mixture of all of the different drugs and booze and whatever, I became essentially a shell of myself. And looking back, I mean, it's really sad, and this might be the case for you watching. Everybody has a different experience with these drugs. Obviously, pretty much everybody that is one of my subscribers has a negative experience. Mine was mixed. I mean, it started out positive, but over the time it became negative, and then very negative when I was too quickly tapered off citalopram in 2018. Went through 2.5 years of withdrawals. Didn't know for a long time it was withdrawal because I wasn't familiar with withdrawal from antidepressants. No one ever told me. And then I reinstated, and things got infinitely worse. And that was when I was placed on benzos and anticonvulsants and antipsychotics and you name it. TMS, I did, like, all of it. And then once I quit that second set of drugs, it was another 21 months before I felt like I was recovering. And this process is so layered because you have, if you're like me, you have maybe a positive experience first starting, and then over time, you become sort of emotionally numb, and then you go through withdrawal. A lot of people aren't tapered properly. It becomes a nightmare, and then, you're gaslit, and you have the isolation, and it can get really, really, really bad. And then once you start to recover, there's like the trauma and the grief. I mean, it's more than anybody should ever have to go through, especially since it's avoidable. It makes me so angry. But anyway, so I've come really far in my symptoms. I'm about 90% symptom free, but there was the trauma of it, and sometimes that's definitely still re-triggered. And there also is the re-emergence of your old self. So today I was listening to songs that I used to love, like prior to taking psych drugs, and I wasn't listening to them for the reason of, oh, I want to listen to songs I used to listen to before I took drugs. It was just, I had a song in my head that I wanted to listen to, and that it brought up all these old memories. And this can be an intense experience because people just feel like they've completely lost themselves and they're never going to get it back. And the truth is, you won't be the same person in the sense that you will have a new respect for life, or a new perspective on life anyway. And the things that used to be maybe stressful or bothersome to you probably won't be once you start to recover, because you'll be like, I've been through the worst hell of my life. All these other things are petty, and so I'm not going to worry about them. You also have a new appreciation for the little things, especially if you're someone that's quite debilitated in your withdrawal. Once you recover and can start doing little things again, like read a book or have a cup of coffee, it can become like a spiritual experience. And it can be even further down. So for me, I am 3 years off all drugs this past February 21st, 2024. And this is still a process for me where I just had all these flashbacks today of who I used to be before I ever took these drugs. And it was like an overwhelming experience. And it was mixed, because part of me was really sad because I essentially lost all of my 30s to these drugs and their withdrawal. And it was also like a positive experience because I felt like, oh my goodness, I'm still in there. And I never truly left. I was just like suppressed and suppressed and suppressed. And then when the drugs were pulled, it was just jacked up, and I'd lived in nonstop fear for years. And neither of those is my true self. And so when I was experiencing and listening to those songs, it reminded me of who I really am. And I'm realizing too that, my mom has made comments like, you seem more like your old self. I'm starting to do things that I used to love to do. Like I yearn to do like a full exercise, like workout, which I haven't done. I've just been kind of walking and swimming over the past couple of years, because I used to be a hardcore exerciser. And I just love to, sit around and, have a cup of coffee or whatever, and just watch some TV or read a book, and I've been yearning more lately for friends. And obviously I have different life circumstances. I'm a mom now and I have a young daughter. And so things obviously aren't going to be the same in a lot of ways now in my 40s as they were in my 20s. But the core of who I am is still there, and it's coming out more and more all of the time. And so this can be an intense experience again, because it can be like, oh my goodness, especially if you're a long-term psychiatric drug user, you don't even know what it's like to kind of have your full everything firing sort of at full capacity, because these drugs just dull everything so much, and that's how they work. And so the real you is still in there, but there are several layers or processes in this journey that you have to go through. And maybe this isn't going to be everybody's experience. This is just what happened to me. And this is what I'm noticing a lot of my clients are going through. And they'll bring things up and I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty typical. You have a lot of the time, again, not for everybody, but you have acute, subacute, protracted. If you end up protracted, then you have kind of the trauma of it. And then you have the rebuilding of your life. And then you have, and some of these things happen simultaneously. And then like the re-emergence of your old self. And it really is quite a process. And I hate that anybody has to go through this, but I just want to tell you that the real you is still in there, and you will reconnect with that real you eventually when you recover and start to recover. And it won't always be like this traumatic thing, or you won't always feel stuck in trauma. You will start to rebuild and live your life normally the further out you get from these drugs, and the more healing that occurs. And then you will get glimpses of your old self, and you will be able to reconnect. And you might be like me, where you realize that you did have that medication spellbinding. The drugs changed you, changed a lot of your personality, and all different facets of it. I mean, that was, again, my experience. And, it's just so nice when you can come out of this and be more appreciative and be more self-aware. So a lot of people too come out of this feeling a lot healthier, or they're so much more aware of like what they put in and on their body and how they spend their time and their days, and how much exercise they get. And people quit drinking and quit smoking and quit drugs, and it's really awesome, because overall they regain their health and even maybe further improve it from where they ever were, even before the drugs. So anyway, I feel like I'm ranting, and I hope that makes sense. But yeah, this whole process is intense, and I just want to give you hope that the real you is still in there and will reemerge, and will reemerge a better version. It's just, you have to get to that point and you have to get through this road, and nobody can do it alone. And even if you have just one other person you can connect with, real life, online, healing buddy, coach, whatever, you need it, because it's a really difficult, very difficult, probably the most grueling and difficult thing you'll ever go through. And so don't do it alone. I mean, there's me, and I connect people to each other. So that's another thing that I do, is I will think about, which of my clients would be a good fit for the other one, especially people who are struggling, or maybe they live alone and maybe they don't have a lot of connections and they don't want to start, going down the rabbit holes of the forums just to find people. And so I connect them. And so there's been some really cool stories come out of that where people are connecting and it's been really positive, and you need it. So I just wanted to mention that, and hopefully this story gives you more and more hope, because that's another thing you need. Hope and support are the two huge things in in the recovery from this. So anyway, I hope you guys are doing well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.